We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
A warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by a good friend of ours, Robbie Lastella. He does great work over at Bracketeer.org. You guys have heard Rocco Miller on this podcast for years. He's one of his main wingmen over there at Bracketeer.org, and he's based a little bit more out there in the eastern part of the country. He does great work over at Florida Atlantic and Owl's Nest as well. Does a little bit of work for the New York Giants, so if you're liking football, he does that as well. We're going to chat with him about what we've seen here in the first week and a half of the offseason, since he does some great work with Florida Atlantic, their offseason, along with the American Conference landscape, and some of the big winners that we have seen here from the transfer portal thus far. Some of the teams that have made the big splash signings, and just a few in general that are catching his eye. In the final segment, I'll give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball on Wednesday. Many more guys coming off the board, signing, so we've got a lot going on there. And in segment number 1, do I have to address the fact that we are seeing more teams that were very much just not wanting to go into the transfer portal, because Marquette, yes, Marquette, someone sound the alarm, alert the papers, they signed someone in the transfer portal. For those that have listened to this podcast, I have begged and pleaded Shaka Smart to go into the transfer portal. He has done so the fact that he actually did so, that means that we are leading the show with it. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters DM, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way, that is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I mean, the rumors are true. They actually signed someone in the transfer portal, Sandero Fruin, and this is a really good get for them as well. Man that comes over from the country of Germany this past season over at Louisville. Maybe not numbers that lit the world on fire, but Marquette was very lackluster down low last season, didn't have a lot of size. They now signed a big man that was able to average 9 points, 6 boards, and 1.4 blocks per contest. I know there are many websites out there that had him as a top 10 transfer. Again, maybe that's going a little bit far, but we are seeing a lot of these teams are realizing, hey, you know what? We can sign guys in the transfer portal. It's not illegal anymore, and I think the schools that are doing it best are the teams that have good balance. Like, you've seen it with UConn over the last few seasons. They kept Alex Caravan on campus for quite a while. Solo Ball was another guy that they've been able to keep there for a few years. You go down the list, but they're still bringing in someone like a Silas Emery. They're still trying to add pieces to be able to enhance what they're doing in terms of being able to develop, and I think that Marquette is getting that through their brain. Like, for Marquette, I have no idea why they've been so against going into the transfer portal, because they had really only signed one guy before they signed Fru on Wednesday, and that'd be Tyler Kolek. That worked out pretty darn well for them, so that always had me very perplexed, very confused as to why they decided, hey, we are not going to go into the transfer portal whatsoever, because he might have been the best player that was on campus for Marquette since Shaka Smart took the job. So they have a nice pickup here. For Marquette, they've had a tough time adding size. They do this. This is exactly what they need, and I think that this is a coming of age for a lot of these schools. It is going to be interesting to see what a school like a Michigan State, who they've dove their toe into the water a little bit into the transfer portal, but they haven't made a lot of like big splash signings yet, what they're going to be doing, and so many others. But it is very clear that some of these schools that have been, shall we say, very against utilizing the transfer portal, they're starting to dive in, because you know that when a school like Marquette dives in, that it's a new day and age in college basketball, and it's always great to be able to get someone new on the podcast. I've never had on Robbie Lastella. I know that our good friend Rocco Miller has been a big advocate of his, so this is going to be a lot of fun to chat with him on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Great to get this man aboard as we have Rocco Miller of Bracketeer.org on so much, and a man that he always plugs whenever he's on this podcast is Robbie Lastella. So I thought, man, we need to get this guy aboard. He's doing a great job covering things out there in more of the southeast part of the country, I think is the best way of putting it, because he does great work for Florida Atlantic. He is the main man over at FAU Owl's Nest. He does great work over at Bracketeer.org. I know if you're looking for a little bit of football, he covers the New York Giants as well, so does a great job covering so many different things, and you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at the letter R, his last name Lastella, Lastella, and then the word report all together. And Robbie, great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Oh, Greg, that's a great introduction. I appreciate it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm a proud alumni of Florida Atlantic, and we and the team at FAU Owl's Nest give them the best coverage out there, we like to say. And Rocco as well. I've been freelancing for his website for the past year, and we got Rocco Miller Airlines. We try to cover as much as we can. I hold down the East Coast for him, like you mentioned. We also have Yvette out here as well. He's everywhere on the West Coast, so we make the most out of it, and we put out some good stuff as well on his website, so it's a lot of fun. But yes, sir.
Absolutely, and got Yvette on the podcast a few times during the NCAA tournament as well. So now we've got the whole Bracketeer.org team on. That makes me excited. And Robbie, I know that you're excited to see what we're all going to be getting this offseason, and we'll talk about the big moves first, but you were talking a little bit about giving FAU some great coverage, and just what have you made out of they and the American here in the offseason? Because you know as well as I do, Memphis has the most resources, and they've been coming up short over the last few off seasons, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the American, with Memphis trying to sign some guys. I know that FAU has made a few moves here over the last 24 to 48 hours after losing a few guys, and for South Florida, certainly it's going to be interesting to see what they do with the Mac attack coming in over there.
Yeah. There's been a lot of, as you can expect, kind of in the mid-major world, there's been a lot of shuffling in terms of the rosters in the American Conference. But like you mentioned, every offseason, Memphis is coming in with that budget. USF is getting up there, but Memphis is still number one in terms of NIL and operations. Both they're number one in. And so, in the offseason, they're rumored for a lot of big guys, but you've heard the frustration with their fan base. They haven't been landing those big name guys in a couple of years. Not only, not getting the big name guys, but they're also not getting the success that fan base is used to. So, Penny, they're very patient with Penny. Obviously, he deserves a lot of patience. He's a legend there, but they want wins. So, that fan base is definitely keeping a close eye on what's going on in the transfer portal. And if that roster isn't looking good by the time the offseason ends, Twitter's going to be a rough place for Penny Hardaway. But I think this year, as long as he doesn't keep an eye on his phone, I think this year is a bounce back year for Memphis. But it's tough to tell because, as I mentioned, there's still a lot of shuffling. I've liked some moves that USF has made with Chris Mack. I'm keeping an eye on kind of how that roster's shaping out. And in terms of, FAU, it's been, since the departure of Dusty May, it's been, tough to kind of maintain that roster. But there's been a lot of talent that's come in here over the past 2 years. I mean, especially last year, they had Baba Miller, Caleb Glenn both go to power conference schools. Matas Vokataitis also, and he was arguably one of the best bigs in the tournament. So the development has been good, but the retainment has just not been there. They were able to keep the number one scoring guard on the roster in Kalen Carlisle, and Kanan's is going to be that guy this year. He's going to be that program. He's going to need to be that program kind of centerpiece this year. They do have the highest rated recruit in program history. Felipe Quinones, brother of former Memphis guard Lester Quinones. He's coming in as the highest rated recruit in program history. And then they just landed Jelani Hamilton as well from Georgia State. He's a high volume scorer. So that's a good thing right now because in terms of what FAU has, they don't have that. Pretty much all the scoring has departed. So they could take a high volume scorer, which is pretty dime a dozen right now in the transfer portal, but FAU has the room for it. And so I'm keeping an eye on how they kind of get a big guy in there. That's always what I'm interested in at the mid-major level is where do they find bigs because they're not affordable if you don't got a lot of money and the power conference teams are willing to pay them a lot. So I'm interested to see kind of where they get bigs, but USF's roster right now, they're the early winners for me kind of in the transfer portal. A couple big name guys, Zayden High coming over from UNC, Mike James coming over from Vandy. And so I'm kind of keeping an eye, and Sonny Wilson as well from Toledo. I can't forget about him. He's arguably going to be one of their best players this year. And then Garrett Johnson as well from George Washington. Yeah, USF is definitely my early winner right now, but things can change quickly. That's kind of what I've noticed is there's some teams sitting out in the transfer portal. I mean, if you were a Kentucky fan, you probably have bitten all your fingernails off by now, but they did just land Zoom Diallo. But I think with this crazy transfer portal, Greg, I think the longer you wait, the price may go down. So, I feel like some of these teams who are waiting in the transfer portal may be able to get some guys at a cheaper rate, or at least they hope. But in terms of the American Conference, I think USF's my early winner. Memphis will be kind of a team to watch. But I think this is a big year as well for Wichita State. Portal Paul, he likes to call himself. I'll be interested to see if they can kind of pull in a big fish over there and make a run, because last year was a good year. They got the fan base rejuvenated, and Wichita State, when they're rolling, they can be a tough team to beat. The American this year, the thing to watch, can it be somehow returned to a two-bid league? The only way I see that happening is if a team that's not Memphis wins the conference tournament. I just don't know if the out-of-conference scheduling will be where it needs to be for that to happen. That's a little bit further away. Let's build some rosters first.
Absolutely. We've got a lot of offseason here. We're only about a week and a half in, so certainly it's going to be interesting to see what we get moving forward as Robbie Lastella does such great work over at Rocco Miller's website, bracketeer.org. He is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and you mentioned it. There have already been a lot of big names that have come off the board. A lot of these teams are waiting. They're hoping that the price goes down because Louisville certainly paid a hefty price to bring in Flory Badunga along with Jackson Shellset, and it looks like they're not done there, but who are a few teams that you look at outside of Louisville, because I think that they probably brought in the biggest package thus far that you have been impressed by, because I feel like the Big East has had a little bit of resurgence with Marquette. Thank goodness gracious, because I'm from this great state of Wisconsin. They finally signed someone, so thank you, Marquette, for that. But I feel like I've been a little bit impressed by the Big East and also a few teams out there in the ACC as well.
Yeah, Greg, I'm with you. You mentioned Marquette. Shout out, I think Jeff Goodman tweeted it out. I think Shaka found his transfer portal login and he got himself a good one. But my early winner here in the Big East is definitely, it's up there. Although I like Xavier's move so far, I think Providence right now has a little bit of an edge on them. And maybe that's just a little bit of bias because I'm a big Devin Vanderpool supporter. I think him and Brian Hodgson and just the Providence culture really is a fit. Devin Vanderpool's a hard-nosed guard. He's physical. He's the type of guard that you put on another team's top guard and just have him pester him defensively the whole game. But at the same time, he can score 20 points a game in a physical way, driving to the rack, an old school kind of dribble in and step back, fade away type game. So he's a fit. But then you put him alongside Miles Bird and Dink Pate. I mean, you could run a 3-guard lineup that I don't know necessarily in the Big East if there'll be a team with 3 guards of that caliber overall. Those 3 are all kind of, in my opinion, overall all-around players. And then today, I mean, they bring in Ryan Sable as well, who's a sharpshooter. I saw a tweet and I agree with it 100%. I don't steal takes, but I saw it on Twitter. So if whoever's listening tweeted it out, I'm sorry. But Ryan Sable and Joseph Pinion in USF's system last year for Brian Hodgson, I think it's going to be very similar. Both kind of another pesky type of defender, but a 3-and-D type of player. So I think Providence is definitely spending some early early cash and spending off, I don't know. I'm not one of those guys. I don't have the NIL valuations, but I'm assuming this is at least a $5 to $6 million grouping of five between Miles Bird, Dink Pate, Devin Vanderpool, Gavin Hightower, and Ryan Sable. And so, they're spending and it's paying off. I'm interested to see where they get a big because, as I mentioned, that fascinates me. Where do we find these guys? Serbia is a hotbed for it right now, but where is Providence going to get that big from? If they can get a big, Brian Hodgson's proven he can take its team to the NCAA tournament that hasn't seen it in a while. USF it has been a little bit, and so year one is not out of the realm of possibilities for Providence to get back to the NCAA tournament, especially if they can succeed in the non-con, set themselves up for an at-large bid. But Xavier, as well, as I mentioned, but you got three scorers in True Washington, Chance Westry, and Ruben Dominguez right there that, in my opinion, rivals Miles Bird, Dink Pate, Devin Vanderpool. Now, I don't know how all of those three are going to mesh. It's a lot of scoring going on right there. I'm interested to see how Richard Pitino puts that all together. But if he can get them to mesh, that's a lot of talent that teams are going to have to worry about. You got True Washington, a guy who's putting up 15 a night. Ruben Dominguez is a guy who's hit 10 triples in a game, and Chance Westry is coming off a year where he was arguably UAB's number one option, so he's going to be wanting to score the ball a lot. And a sneaky big pickup as well in Mike Nwoko. They went early market big. They probably paid a big, pretty penny for Mike Nwoko's services, but he's a talented big. He's played at three different levels, SEC, Big 12, I believe, and now he's going to be in the Big East. Like I said, if Pitino can get those three guys to mesh in Westry, Washington, and Ruben Dominguez, Xavier, in my opinion, is going to be a pesky team this year. I wish my guy Trey Carroll from Florida Atlantic, who transferred in last year, would join the millions of people suing the NCAA for a year of eligibility. He's got a case. He only played less than 20 games his freshman year, but that's neither here nor there. I also like Quinn Ellis to St. John's. I think he's going to be a big threat to be one of the top guards in the Big East this year. Physical experience. Obviously, you get that with a guy coming over from the Euro League, but that's a match made in heaven for Rick Pitino and the Big East. I like that a lot. Providence, Xavier, my top two, but a sneaky pickup as well for St. John's with Quinn Ellis.
Absolutely. And then I know a few other teams that you were bullish on. Miami is certainly one of them out there in your neck of the woods. And just who do you think are some of the teams that we haven't covered yet that have really been winners here in the early part of the transfer portal and you just have liked their offseason thus far?
Yeah, Greg, you mentioned Miami. And it's tough to say that, they kind of had a bit of a downtime. They were in the Final Four a couple of years ago. Larinaga had a, tough go of it with NIL and but they're right back in it. I feel like Jay Lucas was the perfect hire for this program. And, they didn't keep True Washington. They didn't retain as much as I wanted, but, for them to go out and get a Caden Lewis, I think Somto Cyril is going to be an upgrade for them from Ernest Uday at big this past season. So if a Caden Lewis and Dante Allen can make a jump alongside each other, I really think that Miami's got a chance to really make it to that second weekend this year. I think a lot of Canes fans were hoping, they could have a little bit of magic like football, but I think it's a grind. But I think this year is, if those two guards, as I mentioned, Lewis and Allen, can make that jump together, balling in that backcourt for Lucas, I think they can get to that second weekend. And in terms of BYU, I think it's the Trilly Donovan saying the best gets are the ones you always or you already have. Rob Wright returning is absolutely massive. It's it's a win. It's a thorn in the side of Mark Pope, I'm sure, who had a lot of time of him going to Kentucky, and there was a lot made of that on social media. But he returns to BYU, and I think that's a good decision. It wasn't a perfect year last year, but I think you go back, you bring in Colin Chandler, and I think that team right there, they go out and they get a big, and they're in business. And then I want to give a shout out to Auburn and Stephen Pearl as well, keeping Tahad Pettiford and adding Philip Jovic. I think is a good start. Get a lot of momentum winning the NIT, and I think if they can add a couple more pieces, I like Auburn's odds to kind of bounce back here in year two under Stephen Pearl. I think that's the key for a lot of teams this year is to get hot out of the gates. A lot of people like to schedule as difficultly in the non-con, but Auburn's got to find a way to get some early momentum. They can't be scrambling in conference play, having to make graphics to describe where they should be. I think they need to make that clear early on in the non-con the best way they can, and if they can, I like Auburn's odds to have a bounce back year in year two under Stephen. Keeping Tahad, in my opinion, is one of the biggest moves in the offseason. Transfer portal aside, retainment is very important. And Filip Jovic, that's a good grab. So not too many additions for BYU and Auburn, but, keeping guys and adding the right pieces, plug and play, I think, that's how we'll see some success for those squads this year.
Yep, I'm right there with you. When you can do a nice job of mixing and matching, we've seen this with so many teams that have gone deep in the NCAA tournament. You obviously add in the transfer portal, those key pieces, but at the same time, you retain a few of those mainstay starters. We've seen that with UConn over the last few seasons. That has been a recipe for success, and a recipe for success on this podcast is getting on great guests. And Robbie, this was your first time joining. Absolutely loved having you. You're doing great work over at bracketeer.org. You're doing great work covering Florida Atlantic and so much more. So love the good people at home. Know what's all in tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Greg, I appreciate it. You can give me a follow, as you mentioned, on Twitter at Lastella Report, and check out all of our written content at bracketeer.org. That's bracket with EER.org. Rocco Miller has his bracket that he updates throughout the season, one of the most accurate bracketologists out there. And me and a team of writers, we keep track of the Inside the College Hoops section of the website, keeping you updated on the storylines that go inside college hoops. So feel free to check us out. Greg, thank you so much for having me and letting us spread the word of Bracketeer.
Absolutely. Robbie is doing such a great job over there. He's holding it down in the East Coast, and getting him on today was great. We'll need to get him on quite a bit more moving forward. So big thanks to Robbie for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I recap the transfer news and all the news of college basketball that we've seen over the last 24 hours. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Rocco Miller did a great job with that recommendation. Our good friend Robbie, he is very knowledgeable, doing an incredible job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball based out there on the East Coast. Every single time he's joined me thus far, he has hit it out of the park. This is time number 1, so hopefully you got the joke there, but I know it was great to have him on. Big thanks to Robbie for joining me in the last segment. And now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a roundup of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. Houston has already done a great job adding some pieces here in the transfer portal. Dereco Gillespie, Didon Thomas, Corey Hadnot. Now they get a little bit more of an ancillary guy. They're going to be bringing in Braden Neese. He last season was playing over at Lamar. Solid player at Lamar. Wasn't necessarily a lighted up three-point shooter, but Lamar was playing some solid defense at 6'9", 13 points, 9 boards per contest. And for Houston, I think that they realized that their rebounding wasn't necessarily up to snuff last season. Adding Gillespie is going to help out with that. They add 2 nice guards in Thomas and Hadnot. Now they bring in East, who he's going to be probably more of a role player. If you have him starting and if you have him playing like a gob ton of minutes or anything like that, probably not the world's best, but a nice depth piece and being able to spread it around the wealth with regards to this NIL day and age. I do think that that's a good thing. For Houston Christian staying out there in that city, they bring in Bubs Alvarez. He was over at South Dakota State this last season, was averaging about 4.5 points per game, a little bit over an assist per contest. Not a great three-point shooter or anything like that, but at 6'5", can be a nice combo player. This is a nice get for a Houston Christian team that 2 years ago really bursted onto the scene. They have turned over a little bit of a new leaf. They used to be a team that was really pushing tempo and everything like that under the tutelage of Ron Cottrell. Now under Craig Doty, they've been a little bit more defense oriented, a little bit slower. So I do think that this is a sign of the times for them, and I do think that this is a great signing. So love what they do there. And then in terms of Southland, how about a school that has now picked up 3 different guys? For Incarnate Word, they have been spending the NIL budget. I would say the biggest of these is Makai Connor. He comes on over from Sacred Heart, and for Connor last season, he was a very rock solid piece over at Sacred Heart. Maybe not a guy that was going to put up some massive numbers in terms of scoring, but 6.3 assists. He didn't necessarily shoot it well from 3, but we saw what Taj Savetsky was able to do with this program along Davion Bailey last season, a 2-year starter, a guy that's able to dish it out. I think that he is going to be a good fit there. And then you saw D.R.A. Goodwin. He was over at San Diego last season. He decided that he is going to to ink with them as well. Now, I don't think that Goodwin is necessarily going to be putting up amazing numbers or anything like that. He was much more of an ancillary guy this last season with about 5 points, 2.5 boards as a freshman that stood right around about 6'6", so has a little bit of versatility there, but I do think that that's going to be a nice depth piece. And then Maximo Garcia, I just absolutely love that name. He comes on over from Florida State. Again, was he a guy that was like a game changer for Florida State? No, he was coming over from the country of Spain, redshirted this last season, but guy that's able to pop it from three, guy that has the versatility to be able to guard multiple positions. 3 really good gets for Incarnate Word, who's really been able to rise up over the last few seasons. They have yet to make an NCAA tournament. We'll see if they're going to be able to end that drought, but I like what they were able to do there for Wyoming. They add in there Raynard Saunders. He was playing this last season over at Louisiana Monroe. As we know, for Monroe, not necessarily the world's greatest season for them, but for Saunders, 6'9", little bit of a combo player that comes over from Latvia. 34.5% three-point shooter, 10.5 points, 4 rebounds per game. Sundance Wicks is a guy that when he hits the transfer portal, he's not going to necessarily look for the guy that averages like 20-plus points per contest, but still, he's going to be looking for guys that really fit the system. This feels like a guy that just fits that system with Wyoming. They're really good on the glass in terms of grabbing second and third chances. I think that Saunders could be able to help out with that as well. Gives them some versatility, so do like the pickup for them. And then this is a big one with Michael Cooper. He's actually staying at Wright State. He entered in the transfer portal, and he decided that he is going to be returning to where he came. You don't see a lot of these, and I feel like it's worth highlighting because for Wright State, they made the NCAA tournament last year. I've yet to add a guy in the transfer portal, but he was a all-rookie performer out there in the Horizon League. 13.5 points, shot 35.5% from three. A huge piece of what they did last season, so good on Wright State because sometimes some of the best gets are the guys already on their roster. He's already on the roster, so that is going to be helping them out quite a bit. And the fact that they were able to retain him, I thought that that was massive. Washington State has been getting on the board for a few signings via the transfer portal. I really do like this one. Ronnie Harrison, he was playing last year over at East Texas A&M. He was their best scorer, about 14.5 points, 6 boards. Not an amazing three-point shooter at about 30% from the outside, so Washington State, they're going to be banking on Frazier Knight at the Roxborough to really be able to take some strides forward because he's the main guy that they signed there, but should help out a Washington State team that defensively last year, they really weren't necessarily getting the job done, but I do think that this is a signing of a step in the right direction. I do feel like with him being a guy that was able to have active hands, generate a few turnovers, that's going to help them out on that front as well. And I think that this team got helped out as well. Torrey Olson, he last season was over at Middle Tennessee, 13 points, 8 boards. Down low, he was able to give you about a block per contest. Not a guy with a lot of versatility at 6'8", but he's decided that he is going to go to VCU. VCU was a pretty solid team down low, sometimes left a little bit of something to be desired there. Having a nice, shall we say, back to the basket rim protector like this, I think is going to be able to help them out quite a bit. So I do like this pickup for them. For Utah, they're picking up a man from within the state, Jackson Holcomb. He was over at Utah Valley this last season, and he was their top scorer, 16 points, 7 boards, 3.5 assists. Not a guy that was really able to light it up from three, but Utah Valley was one of the best defensive teams in all of college basketball last season. Utah, they were one of the not best defensive teams in all of college basketball last season. This should be able to very much help them out on that front. He's a guy that is from within the state. I absolutely love this pickup for them. It's one that I feel like they need to get on the board. They do get it on the board, so that is going to be helping them out as well. Alabama's been a little bit slow here in the transfer portal. I did like the pickup of Brandon Garrison a few days ago, but now they get Jamarian Davis Fleming in from within the SEC. He was over at Mississippi State last season. Probably a guy that was underutilized at 6'10", 3.7 points, 4.8 boards per contest. They do lose Aiden Sherrill in the transfer portal, and I do think that for Aiden Sherrill, he is going to be very rock solid moving forward at his new spot. But before we get to him, I do think that this is a pretty solid pickup for an Alabama team that is realizing, hey, maybe we should go away a little bit from as many threes as they took, because they took over 53% of their field goal attempts from three-point range last season, but that said, it does appear as though they're perhaps going to be looking to go a little bit more down low. They've been a team that over the last few seasons has been getting decimated on glass. The defense, as a result, has just not been what it has been in the past. So I think that this was a good pickup for them. And with bringing in he and Garrison, they should be better down low. And then in terms of Sherrill, he lands at Indiana, an Indiana team that's gotten very busy. Their biggest signing being Marcus Burton. But now they had a guy in Sherrill who last season over at Alabama shot about 34% from three at 6'10". He's a native of the state of Michigan, so he's a guy that is familiar with the area. 11.6 boards per contest last season. Is used to playing in an up-tempo system. He was averaging over 2 blocks per contest for Alabama as well. Is he going to be a guy that is necessarily going to be like a lockdown defender? As of right now, no, but we'll see if the DeVries system is going to be able to help out with that a little bit. I think that he can become that. He's obviously got versatility. He's able to play at a very up-tempo pace, which I think that Indiana might be looking to play a little bit faster for this upcoming season as well, but I do think that this is a nice pickup for them and a step in the right direction. For Ball State, staying out there in the great state of Indiana, they got a few pickups on Wednesday. They've already added one guy in Kajal Parker, who I really like that pickup for them. He was a good three-point shooter over at UMass, but now they add to it Trey Lewis, who he was actually out there in the conference at Western Michigan for Trey Lewis last season. Put up about 7.5 points, shot 38.5% from three-point range. Ball State was really not checking a lot of boxes other than generating turnovers last season, and with his size at 6'6", should be able to help out with guards rebounding. Not only average about 2.5 rebounds per game last season. They pick up Aaron Fine. He was a walk-on over at Purdue. A little bit TBD as to what you're going to be able to get out of him, but a guy from the great state of Indiana, if I'm not mistaken, a multi-sport athlete as well. He should be able to help out with that backcourt as well. That's a little bit more of a project piece. They might be able to hit it out of the park. It might be a little bit of a flopperoonie. We're going to see there, but I do like the fact that they are adding guys and they are adding depth. I do like this pickup as well. Tristan Beckford, he was over at South Florida last season, and he is going to be heading on over to Bowling Green. I just like Todd Simon as a coach. Beckford didn't see a great amount of minutes over at South Florida last year. 2.5 points, 1.7 rebounds per game. Was a relatively decently recruited guy out of the country of Canada. He's got some versatility. I think that he's going to be able to fit that Bowling Green system. Bowling Green last year was one of the better teams in terms of generating turnovers in all of college basketball, so you'll love to see that. And how about if we highlight BYU's big day on Wednesday as well? They already were able to get one or two pieces onto the board, but their biggest piece is the fact that they re-signed Robert Wright III. He had entered into the transfer portal. He comes on over from Baylor last offseason, and he had himself an amazing year, 18 points, 4.5 assists per game. They're probably going to be looking at him being the main man for them for this upcoming season because they do lose A.J. Devonta, who's going to be, in my opinion, a top 5 pick in the draft, 42% three-point shooter. That's rock solid. They already added Colin Chandler, who was able to have himself a nice season over at Kentucky and was recruited by Mark Pope when he was over at BYU, but now they also pick up Tyler Betsy, a former top 75 recruit that spent some time at Cincinnati and Syracuse. Came off the bench at Syracuse, but put up okay numbers, 6.5 points, 3 boards, and was a 40% three-point shooter at 6'8", so that high-octane three-point shooting style of BYU, that's going to be able to live on. And now they bring in Jake Whalen as well, a guy that began his career out there on the West Coast. Last season, he was a part of a Clemson team where the whole was greater than the sum of its parts, and for Whalen, missed a few games due to injury, but I still was able to put up solid numbers. He was supplying the team with about 5.5 points, 4 boards per contest, began his career over at Utah, where he was a starter for them. He was able to average about an assist and a half per contest at 6'10", so he's able to have some versatility. He's maybe not going to be the most dominant shot blocker, but for BYU, they very much do improve on the glass. After last season, they weren't bad, but at the same time, they were still leaving a little bit of something to be desired, so I do think that they did a solid job with that. And to clean up the bees, you saw Buffalo be able to sign a man from Oregon, J.J. Frakes, a guy that redshirted last season, but from the great state of Michigan, was a pretty highly touted guy at 6'5". He's got some good acumen in terms of shooting, and Buffalo was one of the best mid-major teams in terms of their three-point shooting last season. They're also one of the worst offensive teams as well, so they're going to need to clean that up a little bit, but I do think that this is a pretty solid ad for them, and I do think that for Buffalo, a team that is losing Ryan Sable, among others, that they're going to need to reload. This is a good first step in terms of reloading. And how about Cal? They're bringing in someone from the ACC, Nojas Arsterius, hopefully I got that correct, former top 100 recruit at 6'5" last season for Pittsburgh. Shot about 39% for 3, 9 points, 3 boards as a 6'5", a little bit of a do-it-all combo player. I think that he's going to fit this Cal system relatively well. Now Cal is going to need to bring in guys that can defend. Jake Wilkins, who comes over from Georgia, I felt like that was a good first signing. They're going to need to be able to bring in a few others, but I certainly do think that for Cal, they're once again going to be a very rock-solid team with their three-point shooting like they were a season ago. I do think that that this is, once again, just reinforcing the style that they have been able to put down, and I do think that he's going to be able to be a good fit for them. Maybe he's not going to be putting up like massive numbers, but we've seen a lot of guys going to Cal with not necessarily a ton of fanfare come out looking absolutely amazing for them, so I do think that this is going to be a good signing for them. And then this one I think is solid as well. You saw Demarius Winters go on over from UT Rio Grande Valley on over to Canisius, guy that was seeing about 2.5 points per game, shot 39.5% from three. Now Canisius needs to address the defense. They were absolutely awful on that side of things last season, but still I do think that he's going to be able to do a nice job, give this team some oomph from the outside. They did improve a little bit with regards to their post play last season. They're going to need to sign some guys there because this is their first signing, but a good first signing in my opinion there. And for Indiana, boy, have they been busy. I mentioned the fact that they pick up Aiden Terrell, Marcus Burton. They already had brought in Darren Harris, but now they bring in Bryce Lindsey as well. He was over at Villanova to begin his career, and for Lindsey, he did tail off towards back half of the season, but still a guy that was able to put up 12.5 points, shot 35.5% from three-point range. Again, when it came to conference play, he wasn't the same player as in non-conference play. Conference play, he was only averaging about 9.3 points per game, but still, I love this pickup for them. That gives them another guy that could score and is able to handle a little bit. Samat Yidoglu, he wasn't necessarily playing the world's greatest defense over there at SMU, but you bring in a 7'2" big man, and Indiana was very much suffering with regards to their low post play. Last season was able to average 1.3 blocks per contest. Not a guy that's going to be looking to pop it from three, not a guy that's going to be looking to be a stretch big man. He is very much going to be focused on being able to lock things down low. I love that pickup. And then Jaden Mustaf, he was playing over at Georgia Tech this last season, probably going to be a little bit more of a depth piece for Mustaf last season. 10.5 points, 2.5 assists, did shoot 39% from three. We saw what they were able to do with Lamar Wilkerson last season. Is he going to be Lamar Wilkerson? Probably not, but still, I do think that this is a nice pickup for them. Indiana getting very busy in the transfer portal, so love to be able to see that, and it's very clear that they're looking to revamp things. And Iona, they get a nice pickup of their own. Saduk Abin Ayo, he actually was recruited by Slick Rick Pitino to begin his career over at Iona. In his first year at Iona, didn't necessarily put up great numbers, followed Pitino on over to St. John's, and he was a guy that saw playing time in 61 games over the last few seasons, never really lived up to his billing. 6'7", more of a defense-oriented guy that for his career shot about 35% from three. He's now back at Iona. They already brought in Martin Keel, who over at Idaho State was a nice three-point shooter, averaged 9 points per game. Kashawn Mitchell had some nice versatility over at VCU, so I like the way that they're putting things together out there in the transfer portal line. This team, they've decided that they're going to be putting things together in the portal as well. Two big signings here for James Madison, who, let's call it what it is. It was a little bit of a disappointing season for them, and I would argue that for one of the guys that they pick up, and Garrett Sandra, was a little bit of a disappointing year for him over there at Notre Dame, but I think that this is a good landing spot for him last season over at Notre Dame. He was able to give the team about 3.5 points, 3 boards at 6'11", a career about 33% three-point shooter. Hasn't necessarily taken a ton of threes, but a guy that's capable of taking it from three. Part-time starter over at Notre Dame. This is a good pickup for a Notre Dame team that they're not going to generate a lot of turnovers. They're a relatively slow and controlled team, just like Notre Dame. They run a similar system, so that's a good fit. And now they've got that go-to scorer in Gage Lattimore. I recognize he was at a lower level at NC Central, but he was like one of two guys for NC Central that averaged double figures. 16 points, 4.5 boards. He shot 39% from three-point range. Defense left something to be desired. He did average 1.3 steals per game, but he was a little bit of a blow-by defender. That said, for James Madison, I do think that system in general is going to be able to mask a little bit of the defensive woes. I think that he's going to be able to learn a little bit more defense as well, and I think that this is a very nice fit for them. And then I love this pickup for UTSA. Meet for the Roadrunners, who they had a rough season last year, but Vashon Alouette, he was a guy that just was not a fit for them. Now I think that he's going to a program that fits his needs. In Long Island, for Alouette, he was expected to be one of the big guys for UTSA, just was unable to get out there on the floor. Keep in mind, 3 seasons ago over at Old Dominion, 17.5 points per game, shot 35% from three, went to TCU, became a starter for them. Three-point shooting went downward, but he was one of their main facilitators. 11.5 points, 3.5 assists, 1.3 steals per game, starting in a backcourt for Jamie Dixon. Then he was supposed to be able to take off over at UTSA, gets injured, is unable to get out there on the floor. Now he had on over to Long Island. We saw Long Island finally make the NCAA tournament this past season for the first time as the Sharks. The last time they had been there, they were known as the Blackbirds, but I think that this is a great fit for him, and he should be able to light the world on fire over at Long Island. They lose so much of that backcourt from a season ago, but this is big for them. Kentucky, finally on the board. They pick up Zoom Diallo, a former top 50 recruit who has been solid throughout his college career. He's not a guy that's going to light you up from three or anything like that. Over at Washington this last year, 4.5 assists and 2.5 turnovers per game. Washington was pretty solid in terms of taking care of the ball. Not an amazing offense, 15.5 points per game. And if your big pickup here in the offseason for Kentucky is Zoom Diallo, that's probably not a step in the right direction. They are bringing in a really nice recruiting class, obviously, but I do think that they're going to need a little bit more. But if you plan to have him as like a number 3 guy or something like that, then this certainly is a step in the right direction. So we are still a little bit jury's out on Kentucky, but that's a good first step for them. Mike Collins, he last season was playing over at Louisiana, and he has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Lamar. Over at Louisiana, wasn't able to see a whole heck of a lot of playing time, but that said, a guy that stands right in that neighborhood, about 6'1", should be able to give the team a little bit of facilitation. With losing so many of those guys from a season ago, having a bit of coaching change, they're looking to overhaul and revamp things a little bit. I do think that this is a good first step for them. We'll see what else they get in the transfer portal, because they're going to need to pick up quite a bit more in the transfer portal, but that's a step in the right direction for them. For Central Florida, they're taking a swing on Mr. Dean. First name Mr., last name Dean. He was at Charleston last season. Really didn't see playing time because he was injured. Saw only 3 games. You go back 2 seasons ago when he was over at USC Upstate as a freshman out there in the Big South, so lower level of competition. 15.5 points, 5.5 boards, 2.2 steals per game. Guy was able to do a little bit of everything except shoot free throws at 57%. Central Florida, they were a little bit of a rough free throw shooting team, but I feel like he's a nice cog for this team. For Central Florida, a great offense, good three-point shooting team, and that's why you bring in someone like a Caden Vasco, Lewis Walker from North Carolina A&T. Now you bring in someone in Mr. Dean that's going to be able to help out a little bit more on the defensive side of things. It's going to be able to guard multiple positions. Do like what this Central Florida team is putting together here in the transfer portal, and I thought that was a really nice signing for them. And this is a school that's putting together a nice transfer portal run as well. How about South Florida? The fact that they pick up Mike James from Vanderbilt and Zayden High, who was over at North Carolina this last season. Now, for Zayden High, did he see really a lot of playing time whatsoever? No, but at the same time, he's got a nice pedigree, and I think that he's going to be able to see a lot more moving forward here at South Florida. Last season, over at North Carolina, 6'9", a little bit of a combo player. It's never really shot it well from three-point range, so probably wants to be laying off of those, but he had a few double-figure games towards the back half of the season. That last game in the month of February against Virginia Tech was nice. He was able to average about 3.5 points, 3 boards per contest. I think that this is going to be a nice landing spot and a place where he's going to be able to thrive. And then for Mike James, he last season and Vanderbilt just was unable to really get out there after he had seen some nice minutes over at Louisville to begin his career. Like when he was at Louisville during the 2023-24 season, albeit that was pre-Pat Kelsey, but still, he was putting up 12.5 points, 5 boards, was a mid-33 point shooter, just was not a fit for Vanderbilt, wasn't able to get out there on the floor. I feel like he's going to fit a little bit better here at South Florida. South Florida is making some really nice moves, obviously with bringing in Chris Davis. He was playing under Chris Mack this past season, and the Mac Attack is trying to bring in guys that just sort of know the system in general. I feel like Mike James is going to be a good fit with the system. I love that pickup, so that's a good pickup for them. Cade Kierman, he last season was over at Iowa State, albeit he really didn't play too much at Iowa State. He was averaging 0.9 points per game, but he's decided that he's going to be going to South Dakota, a guy that obviously is going to be able to give this team a little bit more three-point shooting pop. For South Dakota last season, really rough on the defensive side of things. Being able to have 3 years of practice over at Iowa State should be able to help him out, and recognize that he hasn't taken a lot of threes throughout his career, but career 42% three-point shooter, albeit 8 of 19 from three-point range. For South Dakota, being able to get a get like this, I think is big for them. For South Dakota, obviously, they're not going to be getting these guys that are averaging double figures at like the power conference level or something like that, but I feel like he's going to be a relatively good fit there, and I like that pickup. Amon Doris, he last season was playing for the bracket busting Bucknell Bison, and he has decided that he's going to Richmond, but a little bit of a disappointing last few seasons for Richmond, and with Richmond, they always like that one big man that's able to have some versatility. Didn't do a lot of facilitating over at Bucknell, but he was still averaging about an assist and a half per contest. Comes over from the country of Germany, first year of college basketball, 16.2 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Probably want him to rebound a little bit more, as Richmond was not generating a lot of second and third chances, but lots of upside here, lots of ability to be able to score, so I love this pickup for them. Providence, they just keep getting good gets in the transfer portal. Already had added Gavin Hightower, Miles Bird, Ryan Sable, double figures scorer from Buffalo, Devin Vanderpool, top guy from Florian Lang. Now they bring in Samson Alaton, who was over at Yale this last season. He's not going to be a guy that lights the world on fire in terms of scoring, but he's going to be able to give some nice offensive presence to a Providence team that I'm sure is going to be looking to play very much up-tempo under Brian Hodgson. Hodgson realized probably that he wants his team to be able to play some good, tough, tenacious defense, and I knew he was a part of a Yale team that was one of the most efficient offenses in all of college basketball this past season. 8 points, 5.6 boards per contest, a block and a half per game. Not a guy that's going to go out there and shoot threes, but at 6'10", I think that he's going to be able to fit the system. Even though Yale, a little bit more of a lower tempo team, Hodgson obviously is looking to run it and gun it a little bit more, but I think that he's going to be able to find a way to fit. I think that this is going to be nice for them. Emil Skita, hopefully I got that correct. He was playing over at North Dakota this last season, and he has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Portland State, North Dakota State, I should say, and this is going to be school number 4 for him, as this past season over at North Dakota State was more of an ancillary guy, was only putting in there about 4 points per game, but did shoot 37.5% from 3, was much more of a starter the last few seasons over at Sacramento State, and showed that he was able to really dole out the ball during the 2024-25 season at Sacramento State that season. 8 points, 3.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game. So he's played a multiple just variety of different roles. He's been in a lot of different systems. Portland State loves these well-traveled men. They find a way to be able to have them all fit. I think that they're going to be able to do a rock-solid job with this one. So I think that that is another good pickup for them. For Pittsburgh, they have signed pretty much everyone in the transfer portal thus far. Now they bring in Colin Hawkins. Now, this is probably not going to be one that elevates them too much whatsoever. Last season over at Gardner Webb, a very sad Gardner Webb team, 8 points, 2 assists per game. I actually do like this pickup, though, because it shows that Pittsburgh is looking to be able to add a little bit of depth. And for Pittsburgh last year, they really had none of that whatsoever. Like, I don't think that Hawkins is going to be pushing this team to the promised land or anything like that, but it's a whole heck of a lot better than the options that they had coming off the bench in past seasons. So do like to see that they're not just addressing the, shall we say, big-time starters, but they're also looking for some depth pieces and a guy that could be a good role player, a good guy in the locker room, things like this. And I love this pickup for Pepperdine. It's been rough for Pepperdine, but Petar Mistrovich, he began his career over at Syracuse. This last season over at Long Beach State was a part of a team that was really good on the defensive glass. Didn't allow a lot of second and third chances at 6'8", 14.5 points, 6.5 boards, shot about 29% from 3, so he's able to pop it from 3. Not going to be amazing there. Pepperdine going to need to address that a little bit, but they have really looked to beef up down low. They had Mistrovich. They already bring in 6'10" Anthony Robinson from Xavier, a school that did relatively nothing in the transfer portal last few seasons. They're getting active. I love to be able to see that. For Penn State, they're looking to be able to elevate after last year was just all sorts of terrible. They already brought in point guard Jay Rogers from Central Connecticut and Brant Byers, a nice three-point shooter from Miami of Ohio. It's very clear that they're looking to just be able to maximize the backcourt. They're going to need to bring in a big man. If you recall, when they had a little bit of success a few seasons ago, they had Yannick Niederhauser. They have yet to replace him, but now they bring in Robert Blums, 40% three-point shooter from Davidson last year, 12.5 points per game. He's a guy that I think is going to be able to give you a little bit in terms of defense as well. Wasn't generating a lot of steals over at Davidson, but that's just not the Davidson style. I think that they're going to be able to help him just be in a little bit more of, shall we say, the format of what you like over there at Penn State. I think that they're going to get back to generating a lot of turnovers, and it's very clear that this team is going to look to explode in the backcourt. For Oregon State, they've added a lot of size here in the transfer portal. Now they add in there a little bit more, shall we say, three-point shooting and a little bit more versatility as they add a legend. Legend Smiley, great name. He was over at San Francisco last season and average for the Dons, 8 points per game, was a 42% three-point shooter as a part-time starter as a freshman. This has been a really good portal cycle here for Oregon State. Dennis Evans is a former top 50 recruit, just has not been able to get out there on the floor. Xavier Sanson is also a former top 50 recruit. Those are big men down low. Jackson Rasmussen, double-figure score over at Idaho. Deshaun Gorey was pretty rock solid over at Fresno State. Oregon State has done a great job of getting better here in the offseason. Is it going to result in a bunch of wins or anything like that? A little bit TBD, but I do very much like the moves that these guys have been making here in the offseason, and that one I think is a great one as well. So nice to see them going out there and going for it. And then for Memphis, they decided that they were going to get up on the board yesterday as well. They bring in Richard Varvers, who was over at Washington State, and then they've got Braden Cummings coming in as well from Pittsburgh. And the Cummings ad, I think, is a very good one. Last season over at Pittsburgh was dealing with injuries when he was out there, mid-30s three-point shooter. He's a career 34.9% three-point shooter, 12.5 points, 2 assists per contest. He was one of their better defenders as well. Pittsburgh's defense, when he was off the floor, it just went down the tubes. And for Memphis, they do need guys in general general that take care of the ball, because when Penny Hardaway teams have went down the toilet bowl, it's because they have had nobody that's able to take care of the ball. Pittsburgh was relatively okay at being able to do so. And then for Varvers this last season over at Washington State, rock solid 6'7" combo player, shot 41.5% from three, 11.5 points per game. Memphis was way down with their offense this past season, and for Washington State, that was a team that had a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball, so I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the world's greatest fit, and we have seen a lot of the signings for Memphis just not be great. I wish I could put it any other way, but they have not been great. So we're going to need to see what they're going to be doing, because we know that Memphis is not done. They've got money. They look to pretty much add everyone via the transfer portal. They don't believe in developing guys. So we'll see what Penny Hardaway is able to pull out of his rear end. Probably not going to be anything good, but they signed 2 guys. And then you've seen this team be very active for Louisville. Obviously, they bring in Flory Badunga. They also bring in Jackson Shellstead. Now they've got Carter Knox going to the School of Hard Knocks for the team. He shot 37.5% from three for Arkansas this last year. Nice ancillary guy. Was able to put in there 8 points per game as a part-time starter. Now Carter Knox probably not going to be like a 20-point per game scorer or anything like that, but I think that he's going to be able to fit the Louisville system quite well. Louisville low-key was a pretty good defensive team as well over the last few seasons, so I think that this is going to pan out for them, and I do like this pickup. And then I like this pickup as well. AJ Akamono, he was over at Hawaii last season. Hawaii was a really good defense-oriented team. He's decided that he is going to be heading on over to Little Rock. Guy that really didn't see a lot of time. He is a career less than 20% three-point shooter, but I do think that he's going to be able to give this team a little bit more, shall we say, versatility in terms of their defense. For Little Rock, they had such a rough time being able to guard the three-point line. Hawaii last year, they were one of the better three-point shooting defenses in all of college basketball. He's used to playing an up-tempo style. It's a Little Rock team has been playing a little bit more slowly, but you tell last year they were trying to run a little bit more. They had no success with running, but they were trying to run a little bit more. So I do think that they're going to try to turn over a little bit of a new leaf. I think that this is going to be a move that helps them be able to do so a little bit more. And then for our nation's first president, George Washington, they add in their Terrence Arsenault. This is a really good pickup. I thought he was going to do much more at NC State than he did this past season. He's a former top 50 recruit, 4 points per game this last year. He's been a career only about 30.5% three-point shooter, but I mean, for George Washington, they were like Noah's Ark. They had 2 of everything, but they didn't have that main guy. I recognize that he hasn't necessarily put up like absolutely rambunctious numbers yet in his career, but I think that this is a guy that has the potential to be a go-to guy. I think that he has the potential to have a really, really big season in general. So for George Washington, who is losing quite a bit from last year's roster, I thought that that was an absolutely tremendous pickup for them. So applaud them for making that move. And then you saw Travis Torren decide that he is going to be going from Austin Peay on over to Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairleigh Dickinson was fairly disappointing this last season. They had no active hands. They really went away from, shall we say, their guard system. This is a guy that last year shot about 33% from three. Didn't necessarily see a bunch of minutes, but at 6'6", I think that he's going to be able to give the versatility that Fairleigh Dickinson had when they were really, really successful. So I do think that this is them just being able to get back to happy a little bit more, and I do think that this is a nice pickup for them. And then I like this one as well. Omaha Bailu. He was over at Wake Forest these last 2 seasons. Never really found his footing with Wake Forest, but I mean, keep in mind, this is a guy that was very highly recruited when he was coming out of high school. A lot of people had him as a top 25 or so recruit at 6'8". This last year, started to find it a little bit more. 6.5 points, shot 37% from three. Now, was he overrated coming out of high school? Absolutely. I think that we can all realize that, but I am adding him in with Jaden Zimmerman from Quinnipiac, Grand Canyon. I feel like is off in the right direction, and this adds three-point shooting to a team that last few years, they haven't had a lot of three-point shooting. With his size, he's going to be able to guard multiple positions, so I absolutely love this move for them. Marcus Kell last season was over at Western Carolina, and he had himself a nice year. He missed the entirety of the 2023-24 season due to injury, but he's got really good athleticism, 13.5 points, 5 boards. He only shot about 30% from three-point range, but I think that he's going to be a good fit over there at Furman. Furman, they lose Cooper Belzer in the offseason, but they have been able to do a nice job with regards to their low post play. They're consistently a team that's towards the top of all of college basketball with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. This is going to be able to help them out quite a bit. This is going to be able to help out one of our good friends in George Mason as they bring in Afusa Algaru Albor. Hopefully I got that correct. That is a very difficult name to say. He's a former top 100 recruit who, he saw some solid minutes for Butler this last season. At 6'6", he doesn't do one thing great, but he does everything okay. He was averaging 5 points, 2.5 boards, 2 assists per contest. Really didn't shoot it well from 3, but for George Mason, who it felt like their defense just wasn't as sharp as it had been in the last few seasons, picking up a guy like this at 6'6", that's going to be able to guard multiple positions, it's going to be able to help them get back to what they're really good at. So I love that pickup. And Drongus Lagu, he last season was over at UT Martin, just was unable to get out there on the floor. Played in 6 games, and in the 6 games that he played, he was averaging 14 points per game. Not a great 3-point shooter, but he's a good facilitator of the ball. He was averaging about 3 assists, 1.3 steals per contest. Began his career over at San Diego, just as well with injuries, but at 6'6" can be a little bit of a point forward. He's heading on over to Fresno State. Fresno State was much better in year number 2 under the guidance of Vance Wahlberg. Still has a ways to go, but I feel like his versatility is going to help out a Fresno State team that was really good in terms of guarding the 3-point line last season, and hopefully we're getting really good at letting you guys know what's all happening in college basketball right now. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, lower CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, do send these into the timeline. And the other way, that is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Big thanks to our good friend Robbie Lastella, doing great work over at bracketeer.org, for joining me in the last segment. I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast. We've run over 2,300 straight days without a missed podcast, so you know that we're going to be with you guys every single day, breaking down all that we're seeing in college basketball. Once the transfer portal gets sorted out, going to give you guys conference previews, a specialized conference podcast for all these conferences, and then once we get back into the season, picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.